If you have made it this far into the fantasy football playoffs, first of all, congratulations. I want to personally congratulate you because everything is amplified in the fantasy football playoffs. If you didn't make it, that's totally fine too. I am here all year round providing fantasy football content because I love it and I love connecting with you guys. And speaking of that, one of my audience members requested a fantasy football playoffs update for week 16 fantasy football and for the rest of the season for the playoffs. So of course, I am going to provide you guys the updated defense rankings for the fantasy football playoffs in 2023. There's been a lot of names that have moved in and a lot of names that have moved out or down or up. There's definitely been some changes on here that you are going to notice right out of the gate, guys. And I do defense rankings every single week on Football Fanalysts Network's YouTube channel. So please go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So let's go ahead and just dive right into it right now. So the first defense, I put this updated rankings on Patreon. By the way, top 32 defenses on Patreon. If you don't have access to one of these top 12 teams, I put it on there before the video, and I'm sure there were people already shocked with tier 1. I've got the Bills defense is the best. I love the Bills defense schedule. I mean, first of all, this video is being filmed after the Bills just imposed an absolute brutality on the Dallas Cowboys. Like, they didn't just beat them. They absolutely crushed their will in that game. And the next 2 weeks, week 16 at the Los Angeles Chargers. Yeah, they just gave up 60 plus points to the Las Vegas Raiders and against New England at home in week 17. The Bills defense, you could see by numbers on the screen what their strength is getting after your quarterback. Well, the Raiders did that at excess against the Los Angeles Chargers. The Bills actually did that versus Dak Prescott just a couple days ago from the time of this filming. They're just such a defense that's getting hot at the right time. And they just happen to have a great rest of season schedule for a fantasy football defense. So the Los Angeles Chargers, to me, they're in trouble in week 16. And then the New England Patriots are in equally amount of trouble. The Buffalo Bills defense, I want them badly for the fantasy football playoffs. At number 2 here, I've got the Indianapolis Colts. And the Indianapolis Colts, they should not come as a surprise. Like, I've been in on the Colts literally from the start of the season when they weren't even doing very good. I mean, it took us a while to get to this point where I can actually trust them to put them at this level. They've been here for a while, though. Filming this after week 15, and they crushed the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they're just continuing to be a dominant fantasy defense for you. Because I say this all the time. And this isn't displayed by the numbers on the screen. They give up a lot of yards. And they give up a lot of points. Obviously not to the Pittsburgh Steelers with Mitch Trubisky. But they gave up a lot of points to a lot of good teams over the span of this season. And you can see on the screen, they're averaging about 3.5 sacks per game as well. They're averaging a pick per game. They're averaging over a forced fumble per game. And almost every third game, they get a defensive or special teams touchdown. That's crazy. And they've got at Atlanta, week 16, they just fumbled again offensively, as they do. And then versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I don't think either of those matchups are particularly just like fantastic, but I do think that with the Colts defense strengths, getting after the quarterback, that's going to help them against the Atlanta Falcons, against the Las Vegas Raiders. They're also keen on getting interceptions. That'll help versus both of those teams as well. The Colts defense, to me, has just been so excellent, and none of those opponents scare me in the playoffs. Colts defense firmly planted at number 2. At number 3, the Denver Broncos defense. I've risen on them quite a bit. And obviously, filming this after week 15, when they just got trounced by the Detroit Lions, is not a good endorsement on what they can do. I understand that fully well. You look back to their past month, you'd see mostly good games from their fantasy football defense, though. And just a reminder, this is a team that gave up 70 points to the Miami Dolphins in September. For them to rebound and average 7.9 fantasy points per game right now, that is huge. I mean, that's just, it's ridiculous, honestly. It's a massive feat They're averaging almost 3 sacks per game. They're averaging over a turnover per game, basically 2 turnovers per game. This defense gets to play the New England Patriots and then the Los Angeles Chargers. Same schedule as the Bills, except flipped. And they're both at home. The Broncos defense, to me, they're firmly in the playoff hunt. I think they're about to smash in the fantasy football playoffs. At number 4, I've got the 49ers defense here. And the 49ers, a couple weeks ago when I did the original updated fantasy football playoff rankings, they were they were even higher. I don't think we can rule out the Baltimore matchup, though. The Baltimore matchup is brutal this upcoming week. Now, they just crushed the Cardinals. That's great. But the Cardinals are not the Baltimore Ravens here. So I do think they have a real tester coming up. It is at home, which is why I don't fear it entirely. But you get past them, you've got the Washington Commanders in Washington. They're about to smack down on Washington. 3 sacks per game, over an interception per game. This is a defense that is just like red hot right now. Their team is red hot right now. And by the way, they're fighting to secure that number 1 overall seed. So they're not just going to roll over and decide, we'll take our foot off the gas. That's not coming for the 49ers. I love the 49ers defense in the fantasy football playoffs still. The Browns defense here, and every single playoff defense ranking video I've done, they've been around this range. I love the Browns defense for the playoffs. First of all, from a numbers perspective, 3 sacks per game, over 1 turnover force per game, and they're averaging just under 9 fantasy points per game. Now you add on their schedule on top of it. At Houston, that's not an easy matchup. They just won against the Tennessee Titans with Case Keenum in. So they're 100% in playoff play, and they're going to keep fighting for sure. And then they'll get CJ Stroud back. They'll probably be playing against CJ Stroud. The Browns will. But then you get the New York Jets at home, who have just been eliminated from playoff contention. So Aaron Rodgers not coming back. There's no threat of that. And the Browns, they're securely in the number 5 seed for the real NFL playoffs. The Browns defense, great all year. They're going to keep fighting. I love the Browns defense in the playoffs. The Eagles defense here at number 6, it is tough. It is really tough. So let's address the numbers on the screen right now. There is not a thing that's incredibly special, aside from, almost averaging 3 sacks per game, which is a good number. That is a good number. But they're not creating turnovers very much, and they're averaging 6.5 fantasy points per game. Now, they've played a tough schedule up to this point for sure. We do have to keep in mind. They played the 49ers. They played the Cowboys twice already. They've played really good teams. But this is not a defense that's great. So why are they here at number 6? I'll tell you why. Versus New York Giants in week 16 and versus Arizona in week 17. Both in Philadelphia, both bad teams. So the New York Giants that just put up 20 plus on the Green Bay Packers a couple weeks ago, yeah, they came back down to earth against the Saints. And they had a terrible game. So they're not exactly a massive threat. Then Arizona, who has been, just got crushed by the 49ers. And they're on a downward trajectory as well. So the Eagles defense, based on matchup, I've got to put them here. I will play them over defenses like the Cowboys at number 7 in a lot of circumstances. And really, that was the defining factor. When you look at the Cowboys defense on the screen, their numbers speak for themselves. This is not updated after week 15. So that fantasy points per game metric, that'll go down for sure. But their defense definitely speaks for itself. You don't need me to tell you that they're some great fantasy defense. What you do need to hear is, and you know this at this point, a lot of you do, at Miami versus Detroit, week 16 and 17. This schedule is brutal. Now, I have said this for a long time now. I actually think the Dallas Cowboys match up well against the Miami Dolphins. I do personally think that. But then you get Detroit at home, and that's kind of a wild card. So the Cowboys defense, I only see it one or two ways. They either absolutely crush it unexpectedly in the fantasy football playoffs, or they bomb. There's really 2 outcomes. Are you willing to take the risk? I would bet a lot of people are probably not, but I do believe they belong inside the top 10 for the fantasy playoffs. The Chiefs defense at number 8 here. They came through against the Patriots. They weren't excellent. They weren't outstanding, but they did have 10 points. So they didn't lose you any points. 10 points is good. Against the New England Patriots, we would have hoped to see much better, but they did hold it down. Now, in the playoffs, they've got the Las Vegas Raiders week 16 and then the Cincinnati Bengals week 17. When we ranked these initially over a month ago at this point, I thought this was a great schedule. I mean, the Raiders, were in shambles with Josh McDaniels, and then the Cincinnati Bengals were just without Joe Burrow, and I was like, they're not going to do well. Well, the Bengals are actually still playing really good football with Jake Browning, and the Raiders have a shot of life with Antonio Pierce at interim head coach. So I don't love the schedule nearly as much as I used to. The Chiefs defense, they're risky for sure. I mean, they're going to continue to be risky, but I do think that with over 3 sacks per game, this defense does have upside here because they get the Raiders at home and then they get the Cincinnati Bengals at home as well. So they've got 2 home matchups. In Arrowhead, I do think those teams can struggle, which is why I've got the Chiefs defense at number 8 and the Ravens defense at number 9. Obviously, the Ravens defense is such a better fantasy football defense than the Kansas City Chiefs. We're not arguing on that right there. You can see the numbers on the screen. I mean, they're averaging over 10 fantasy points per game. Again, not updated from the Jacksonville game. And they handled the Jags too. I mean, they're legit top team in this league. I mean, there's no question here. But again, schedule is not in their favor. At San Francisco week 16 versus Miami week 17. At San Francisco, there is no way around it. This is not a good matchup. Not at all. I would not want to start them at all. This is why they're down this low. I mean, even if they were playing a team like Dallas, I might have had them ranked higher, but then they've got the Dolphins, and the Dolphins can score points, obviously. So I don't know how it shakes out. It's very similar to the Cowboys defense. Talent, yes. Absolutely great fantasy defense, but their matchups are brutal. So I've got issues here with the Ravens at 9, but I still love the defense and would take a shot if I didn't have access to a lot of those other teams. The Bengals and the Seahawks at 10 and 11 here. So the Bengals, obviously, they don't have some great fantasy defense. We're not going to sugarcoat this one. They don't have a bad real-life defense, though, by the way. They don't. They're like the Chiefs in a lot of ways. But their fantasy defense just doesn't get it done enough. 1 pick per game's good, but you average that out with basically no defensive touchdowns. You get not many forced fumbles. You get, 2.5 sacks per game. 7.6 fantasy points per game is what you get. That's just the thing with them. But they've got the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New York Jets both on tap week 16 and 17. I want in on those matchups right there. They're both away. Neither one of them are at home. So maybe, especially with the divisional thing with Pittsburgh, if Kenny Pickett plays this week, maybe it's different. Wink, wink, it won't be. So I think just based on matchup, it's great here. And I feel the same about the Seahawks. You can see their numbers on the screen. It's not like they're doing great as well. The Seahawks defense, what I will say is they do have pass rushers. And they do have youth and physicality. They're just on a bad trajectory. But these next 2 opponents might help a lot. At Tennessee versus Pittsburgh. So they, just from schedule, and by the way, Will Levis went down on Sunday. So I don't know, as of the time of filming, what his injury status is. Imagine they get to play against Ryan Tannehill and Mitch Trubisky. I mean, the Seahawks defense, I don't think they can be left out here. That's just the bottom line. And then the Jaguars defense to round it out at number 12. The Jaguars taking on Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay and then versus Carolina. Without the Carolina matchup, they would not be here. They wouldn't be here. I mean, the Jags defense has been just a massive disappointment in recent weeks. I mean, it's been bad. And again, I do think it's important to note here that they have played tough opponents over that time. Like they were in position to compete with Baltimore in week 15. Their offense just couldn't get it done. So that offense, separate issue, they were actually holding them to very few points and very few yardage, by the way, in the first half. So if you give them Carolina in that championship week, I think they're going to do great because everybody does great against the Panthers. Tampa Bay is obviously not an ideal matchup, but it's not the worst matchup. So the Jaguars, I think with that Carolina Panthers matchup, just have to be here at number 12. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for your fantasy football playoffs. You can find the top 32 fantasy football playoff defense rankings on Patreon. So go down there in the comments, click on that link, look at the tiers, see if you're interested. If you are, great. If you're not, no problem. Thank you for being here. I appreciate the support.